Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Cipher Brief. I'm Suzanne Kelly here with our COO, Brad Christian. One of the most important things that we do here at the Cipher Brief is to serve as this bridge of important conversations on national security issues between the public and private sectors. Because our belief that particularly with the rapid pace of technology, future US national security simply cannot be addressed by government alone. One of our speakers today, Sue Gordon, has spoke extensively about that, and I hope that we can maybe have a whole separate conversation with her about that public-private relationship in the future. Our annual threat conference will be hosting these important conversations in person this year in October. You can find out how to be a part of that event at tcbconference.com. And until then, we'd like to welcome you to these important conversations virtually. Now, over the next 6 months, we're going to be talking with experts about artificial intelligence in the new age of security. Our goal with this series is to bring greater attention and expertise to the issue of AI and how it will change the nature of intelligence moving forward. We'll be hearing from a number of experts on this from both the public and private sectors, as both are crucial to understanding AI, developing it, identifying gaps that need to be filled, and integrating AI into US national security, intelligence collection, and analysis. Today, we'll be welcoming a number of incredible guests on this topic. I'm going to try to hide the fact that I'm very excited about this conversation as we lay out the blueprint for AI and national security and kind of create a baseline, if you will, of where we are and where we need to be. Okay, some quick logistics for you. I'd like to welcome a number of former national security leaders to the call today and Cipher Brief experts. We also have a number of journalists with us today. Today's briefing is on background. If you'd like to reach out to our guests for on-the-record comment, please let us know, and either Brad and I will connect you with them. Please submit your questions for our speakers today by using the chat box. It's in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You should see it there. If you don't, or if you're joining on your phone, you can always email your questions to Brad at bchristian@thecipherbrief.com, and please get them in early. I'm anticipating a lot of questions today, and I'd like to get to as many of your questions as we can. All right. Before I welcome our expert lineup, I'd really like to thank the sponsor of this series of important conversations, Microsoft Federal. Mark Valentine is an expert in his own right on these issues. He's the general manager of Microsoft's national security team, where he focuses on delivering advanced technologies to warfighters and analysts across both the military and the intelligence community. His most recent efforts include adapting cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and mixed reality tools to generate insight for military personnel to increase training efficiency and enhance operational outcomes. Mark, welcome, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing in the private sector after having a military career of your own. And thank you so much for sponsoring this series of conversations. It's an important one.
Excellent. Thank you, Suzanne. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm honored. Thanks for the great intro, probably better than I deserve. But I just want to start off by saying I love the title of this series and this specific event. The idea of a blueprint for AI, I think implies that we're on a journey. And it's a journey that we're at the very beginning of, and I think that's apt. Even though the concept of artificial intelligence actually is quite old, I think we're just now moving into the actionable phase of that. So it's definitely an exciting time. And as you mentioned, we in private industry have started on this journey and been actioning it for a while. And it's really amazing to me that whenever we get into these discussions, it's real easy to get drugged down into the technical aspects of it immediately. And we end up with these detailed technical dives on infrastructure, algorithms, and so on and so forth. But when I talk about it, I really like to start with why. Why are we even talking about this to begin with? Why is it important to a national security audience? And to do that, I actually like to think about, I created my own little personal thought experiment, and I think it's valuable for everyone to go through. And it starts like this. So imagine a future conflict where all sides, or to make this a more simple bipolar issue, where both sides have access to the exact same data. So every sensor we have and every feed from that, we share with the enemy or the adversary. And conversely, every sensor and every feed, every report, every comment intercept they have, they instantly share with us. So who in that environment wins? And I think it's relatively simple, but generally speaking, and it's my contention, that it will be the side that can derive insights from that data and then turn those insights into action faster than the competitor. That's who will win. So in essence, when I get to the why of artificial intelligence, at least it's my contention that we're focused on faster insights and faster action. Now, there are other ways to do that, but we quickly reach some natural limits, right? I can only think so fast. You can only think so fast. We can only create action so fast. So we have to go to machines, or in this case, digital computers, to assist us in that process. And when we do that, we kind of start with analysis. And then from analysis, we perhaps move to simple automation. And then from automation, we start progressing to what we call AI. In this case, I contend that's more narrow or purpose-specific AI, but narrow AI at present. And on our journey, at least for the 6 years now that I've been in the private sector, I found several learnings that we've had across our company. And I think these would be consistent across any other company in this space. And first and foremost, I look at AI as something that supports, not replaces, human decision making. And back from my old flying days, we used to talk about the concept of brain bites. So I had so many brain bites that I could apply to any specific problem at a time. And I think that's what we're trying to do now, in that we're trying to free up the limited cognitive space we have as human beings and focus that limited cognition on very specific problems that we as humans are good at solving, and then allowing a machine to help where it is best. They're actually best at doing really rapid iteration of relatively simple tasks. And then there are tons of other lessons that we've learned, and I kind of bend them into 3 categories, and that's really technology, policy, and culture. And when I talk about the technology piece, that's the beeps and squeaks part of this, the infrastructure, the data itself, how do we ingest it, how do we store it, how do we analyze it, and then all of the user interface and user experience parts of supporting human decisions. And again, like I said earlier, that is kind of the sexy stuff, and it's easy, especially for a group of technologists, to get stuck on that piece. But I think the real learnings that I've come to recognize over the last several years have been in that policy and in that cultural environment. And more specifically in the policy side, if you go back to a previous statement about AI needing data, well, if we recognize that AI can provide greater insights with broader inputs, but then you look at how we invest as large organizations, whether it's private industry or public sector, we tend to invest in a siloed fashion, whether that's by department or by functional area. And the way we make those investments based on our organizations, I think often hampers us in developing a broader set of inputs, which can make our AI create better insights. And that leads to the whole idea of data governance and others. So I think the policy area is very important. And then finally, I do think it is the most important, is the cultural aspects. And some of the things that I've learned while in the private sector, I think have been the most impactful. And it sounds crazy, but this idea that Satya Nadella talks about having a growth mindset, I think is the key to it all. Because we are talking about a monumental, fundamental shift in how we do things. And when many of us have been successful because of what we've done in the past, sometimes it's hard not to be a know-it-all and think, yes, I know everything there is to know in this domain. But making that subtle shift over into being a learn-it-all, I think, is really the secret sauce behind making this transition. Additionally, one of the things I've noticed in our company in how we build things is, instead of waiting until we have the 100% solidified requirements and then building the thing, being able to start with more of the 80% project and iterating on it in a rapid fashion after that tends to be more important. And then I can't leave this conversation without laying out the idea of ethics as being foundational, part of the culture. And we don't have time to dig deep into each one of these, but making systems that are accountable to human beings, so that there is a human that is accountable for what happens and the outcomes, making a transparent system, not just for the standard reasons, but also so we can identify, hey, here are areas where bias occurs. These are errors. These are some unintentional outcomes, and we need to make sure we fix those. And then the ideas of fairness, privacy, and security are absolutely important. So, Suzanne, again, thanks for the time. I really appreciate being here. It's really hard to define all the issues, to detail a blueprint for AI in only a 5-minute interview. But I really hope these ideas kind of set the stage for the more detailed conversation to follow, because at least in my view, these capabilities will absolutely influence, if not define, success or failure for our forces in the future. So thank you very much.
Mark, it's so important, and I want to thank you. Having Microsoft along for these conversations is going to be really important to understanding how we identify these gaps. And one of the things that you talked about specifically, both how we invest in AI, is actually one of the topics for this 6-part series. So we look forward to welcoming you back. Thanks again. I think you have set the stage perfectly in thinking about the growth mindset and how there needs to be a cultural change in how we think about AI. So I think you have teed this up beautifully. I can't thank you enough for being here and for helping us think through these issues over the next 6 months. So thank you, Mark.
Awesome. Thanks, Suzanne. Look forward to it.
That was just an excellent introduction. With that, I'm just going to go right to our next guest. I'm very pleased to welcome General David Petraeus. I believe all of you are familiar with the General's bio. He served for more than 37 years in the U.S. military, culminating his career with 6 consecutive commands, 5 of which were combat, including command of the multinational force Iraq during the surge, U.S. Central Command and Coalition, and U.S. forces in Afghanistan. He subsequently served as director of the CIA, and he's now a partner in a global investment firm, KKR, and he chairs that firm's Global Institute. General, welcome. It's great to see you.
Great to see you, Suzanne. Thanks for hosting this great series. It looks to be very stimulating.
Well, thank you, sir. I'm very pleased to have you with us, and I really want to dig in on this with you today to get a better understanding of how you see AI developing in the near future and how you believe it will best support both military and intelligence in the future national security mission. So with your permission, sir, I'm going to duck out, put all the focus on you for the next 10 minutes or so, and then you just let me know when you want me to come back in and we'll keep going.
Well, great. Thanks, Suzanne. And also just a privilege to be the warm-up act actually for one of my heroes from CIA days, our former Deputy DNI, Sue Gordon, and also for a hero of the intellectual academic arena, and that's Professor Jason Methane. Both of them are really the authorities in this field. And again, I really wanted to just offer a few very brief comments, Suzanne, and they build, if you will, on what our old fighter pilot Mark Valentine offered at the end about the ethical issue, and to challenge a little bit, I guess, the very biggest of the big ideas about AI, and that is that there's always going to be a person in the loop. And certainly there can always be a person in the loop, but not perhaps the way that we think that might be the case. In other words, with the person reviewing all of the information, and again, focusing the brain bites on just this particular situation, and taking a split second to evaluate it all and then to press some button or make a decision or do something that will then unleash some kind of kinetic or cyber or other action. And the truth is that while we all absolutely want to have a person in the loop and have it accountable, as Mark rightly noted, that the person in the loop may actually be when the algorithm is made, when the leader, the senior commander or policymaker establishes certain conditions that are going to be verified or confirmed by the machine, by, let's say, a robot or an autonomous aircraft or vessel or what have you, and that's going to be where the person is in the loop and actually establishing those conditions. And I'll work through my sole remaining soldier now is K9, and she is very, very good at ensuring the perimeter of the security at our combat outpost in North Arlington, Virginia. But again, the idea here is that what I think is the conventional thought about the person in the loop, that again, there's going to be some split-second decision by a human reviewing everything that the machine, the augmented over time increasingly by not just machine learning, but true artificial intelligence, that at the end of the day, that the person's going to act on that. And I think that if you do that, your robot on the battlefield, your autonomous air or maritime system might be dead, because the adversary's system is not going to require the person in the loop at the last minute. It will have built it into the algorithm. And again, the transparency of these decisions that are embedded in the algorithms is going to be critical. Again, certainly I agree with Mark about the concept of accountability being built into this. But I think that over time, increasingly, the role of human beings is going to be in building the decision-making process that is embedded in the algorithm, that then with the use of facial recognition, gait recognition, a variety of other recognition capabilities, perhaps in cyberspace or in the real world, these are going to be what will lead the machine to check off condition after condition, of course, at the speed of light of machine and so forth. And it's going to be the machine that is the quickest that is going to survive in whatever battlefield, whether again it's on land, air, sea, or in cyberspace or outer space. That is again something that I haven't seen in print from the Joint AI Center. It has an ethics entity in it. I'm sure that they're grappling with this issue, but I think to put it out there up front and to, if you will, challenge perhaps gently intellectually the notion that there's going to be a human in the loop all the way up to the very final decision might contribute a bit to the conversations that are going to take place over the course of this 6-part series that you have established, Suzanne. And so with that, again, with great appreciation for being allowed to be the warm-up act for Sue and Jason, I'll hand it back to you.
Sure, thank you so much. And honestly, the dog barking in the background, I've had the pleasure of meeting your dog virtually. It makes us feel like we're all at home with you today. So thank you for that. We appreciate your thought.
Thank you, Suzanne. Congratulations.
Thank you. All right. So now it's my great pleasure to welcome, honestly, 2 of the brightest minds in national security to talk about creating this blueprint that we talked about for AI. And they are both truly brilliant individuals. The Honorable Susan M. Gordon is the former Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. It's a mouthful, I know. She assisted the DNI in leading the intelligence community and managing the ODNI. In particular, Sue focused on advancing intelligence integration across the IC, expanding outreach and partnerships, and driving innovation across the community. Prior to that role, she was the Deputy Director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and before that, served in multiple senior roles at the CIA. In the private sector, Sue is advising companies on a range of national security-related issues, and she is a senior consultant to the sponsor of the series, Microsoft. Sue, hi, welcome.
Hey, Suzanne. Great to see you.
Jason.
Great to be here.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I was just going to jump in and introduce Jason real quick. Sue already knows Jason super well, and we're going to hope that these 2 don't go into all sorts of random discussions today. That would be fascinating. Dr. Jason Methane is the founding director of Georgetown Center for Security and Emerging Technology. He's also the former assistant director of national intelligence and director of IARPA, where he was responsible for the development of breakthrough technologies for the U.S. intelligence community. He's also a member of the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence and was named one of Foreign Policy's top 50 global thinkers. He served on various White House committees related to artificial intelligence, biosecurity, high-performance computing, and quantum information science. Did I promise everyone that they were brilliant minds? Both of you welcome. Thank you for being here.
Great being here. Thanks so much, Suzanne.
I thought I might just start by throwing a question out there to get the conversation going, and then feel free to jump in, ask each other questions. I've already got a list of things lining up over here that I see questions from the audience. But let me just start by asking you both for kind of an assessment of where you think we are today with AI and national security, and then we'll talk about where you think we need to go. Sue, would you mind kicking off?
Sure, and nice lead-in conversations really resonate with both Mark's comments on, oh, you wanted to use it, and the general's comments that one of the great myths of our time is that you're going to be able to put a human in the decision loop. Decisions are going to have to be made so fast that's just not going to happen. So I applaud both those. So here's what I think. The blueprint for AI has to start with what outcome you're trying to achieve, what's your mission. You cannot, I always give the example of when JFK decided to go to the moon, he got Tang and Velcro. He didn't say, let's build Tang and Velcro and see if that takes us to the moon. So the first thing is we gotta know what we're doing. I think there are some really clear imperatives, certainly for the intelligence community, where if clarity and wisdom and insight is your raison d'etre, you cannot live in this world without some assist in terms of understanding that. So imperatives is the right thing. So it has, the ecosystem probably have, I can't remember how many elements, I'll say 7 and we can count them up. Data, infrastructure, technology, assurance, the humans, I think I'm only going to get to 5 or 6, and then the culture. In each one of those areas, we're doing things that are good. And I give us in those elements of the ecosystem, a D, an F, a C minus, an F, and an F. So at scale, to achieve the outcome we want, we are doing tons of good things. There is AI resplendent throughout the national security community doing things. But is it doing the thing we need? Is it organized as a way to do it? So to me, that's one of the greatest imperatives that we have, is to be able to do that. And so that's my framework. Is that sounds depressing, but it should, if you take Mark's urgency and you believe that some version of what I said is true, and even if I'm off by a letter grade because I'm a hard grader, we aren't doing enough. In other words, we're not beating the turn of the earth, and this is a data world. Just for last piece of context, actually in my first branch chief job in 1988, I started an AI project, and it was no less ambitious than the ones we have now, and no more successful. And here we are, how many years later? So we've got to think differently about this, and then we need to invest, but it only begins if you know what you're trying to accomplish. Now fix that, Jason, as you always do.
So I agree with Sue. I mean, I think your grades are appropriate. I think we have made progress institutionally. The stand-up of the Joint AI Center, the AIM initiative in the IC that Sue started, the National Security Commission on AI that's offered a lot of thoughtful recommendations to government. We've got things like the Defense Innovation Board's AI principles that are now being promulgated through DoD. The US led the OECD's adoption of AI principles, and we helped to establish the Global Partnership on AI. We've seen increases in funding for AI within DoD, the IC, NSF, NIST, NIH, and other agencies. Not as much as we need, but it's heading in the right direction. And in the latest NDAA, there was a horn of plenty for AI, including new initiatives for research, testing and evaluation, semiconductors, which are an important foundation for future progress. Just last week, OSTP announced the stand-up of an AI coordination office at the White House, which I think is important. So we are making progress, but there are some core areas where we've done really badly. We have not worked well with our allies on everything from getting a joint cloud infrastructure for Five Eyes or NATO to share tools, test tools, figure out how we can be interoperable if we need to use those tools during wartime. In export controls, we've had a go it alone approach that has created lots of loopholes that have been easy for people to avoid those controls. And I think perhaps most damaging of all, we've slid backwards on high-skilled immigration. One of our greatest historical strengths as a country has been our ability to attract global talent. It was our primary source of technological strength during World War II and the Cold War, as we attracted the world's best scientists and engineers. It's really one of our nation's superpowers. But for the last year, we've effectively tied kryptonite around our neck and made it much harder for scientists and engineers to join our country. And CSAT, where I work at Georgetown, has done a lot of work quantifying this and made me think that this is really one of the most critical plays for the country on AI and other emerging technologies. And then a little more down in the weeds, our government acquisition system has made it about as hard as possible to acquire software, including AI. Our IT systems need to be substantially modernized so that we can actually deploy modern software on them, including AI tools. I think the experience at the Joint AI Center is that 90% of the challenges in deploying AI come down to basic IT problems: network infrastructure, shared databases, certification and accreditation of tools. So we need to fix the pipes before we start getting into the details of AI. And then lastly, on the government side, our HR system for hiring makes it very, very difficult to bring in talent. Sue started a major effort on security clearance reform in the IC, which we need to continue advancing, and establish more flexible hiring for the majority of technical experts who aren't looking for permanent positions in government, but want to spend a few years helping to support IC missions.
Sue, you're the ultimate insider on all of this because you actually ran these programs. You started a lot of these programs. For the rest of us who kind of are out there, not in government and scratching our heads going, why are these things so difficult? I mean, we know what we need to do. We know this is a competitive area for us that could be make or break for future U.S. national security. Why is it so hard? And what do we need to do to change it?
So Jason has hit on a couple of things that make it so hard. One is just the state of our IT infrastructure and the architecture itself that was designed for humans, not for machines and data, and it wasn't designed to cross organizational boundaries, and we haven't solved all the security issues. ATO still takes too long. So there is just a really significant blocking and tackling issue. I think that in President-elect Biden's relief package, there is $10 billion for IT and cyber. What excites me most of that piece is the idea of getting everybody up to a level of infrastructure maturity that we can start doing some interesting things. So even within the intelligence community, even within the department, not even going between them, it's still a challenge to get them all in the same place. The second is culturally where we make our decisions. Who has the decision authority? And the decision authority right now is either too big. Heads of organizations have a big authority, but they don't have the wherewithal to then take their guidance and have it necessarily implemented. And where most of the action is and where most of the budget is too small, so people can take on the thing that modernizes or attacks their problem. The problem is all things today are attached to another piece of the chain. So a little bit of our challenge is just where the decision authority is and what goodness you can take on. And so despite the harshness of my grades, that's kind of accounts for, we are doing tons of good things at local levels and much more insertion of technology than is commonly felt, but the effect is harder to achieve because they just aren't quite as big. And then I think the third is, there's 17 of these, but the third I'll pick is the gap we have in terms of technical comfort between our leaders and the technology that needs to be applied. And if you don't have technical comfort, you will think that technology introduces more risk. Where I think if you have more comfort, you can see in some cases, technology when properly applied can actually reduce risk. Security clearance is a good example where I would apply AI today. I think you could actually lower some of the risk of who we got, but that is just massive cognitive dissonance. So it bleeds into cultural issues, but I think it's actually just the difference between the comfort in our leaders today with what we have to employ in order to be able to do the offensive piece, not just protect against bad things happening.
And Jason, not only are you at CSET now as the founder of the center there, but also former Director of IARPA, you serve on White House committees on these issues. Where are some of the gaps, in addition to what Sue's already very articulately laid out, that we need to be focused on I wrote down when I was listening to Sue, fix ourselves first. What are some of the ways we can start to do that?
I think the assurance problem that Sue mentioned is a big one. This is something that the private sector doesn't have a whole lot of incentive to solve itself, because it generally is not dealing with competitors who are trying to break all of their systems at once. And so I think this is a special need for the IC and for DoD to develop the testing and evaluation methods to defend our AI systems against intelligent attacks. And there are some encouraging signs there, including the NDAA language about investments in testing and evaluation. But this is an area that we'll need to continue advancing, because our adversaries are going to get more sophisticated in how they try to break AI systems, reverse engineer data sets, come up with sort of optical illusions that confuse AI tools. We really, I think, need to build a dedicated red team mentality in which we try to break our own systems with sincerity, test our AI tools for vulnerabilities and for unexpected failures. And it took us a couple of decades to develop that sensibility for cybersecurity. We don't have that much time to afford waiting 2 decades to develop that for AI. We really need to start that right away.
Mm-hmm.
I love that last idea of Jason's. I think both in AI and cybersecurity, we are not running a continuous game of cat and mouse of best offense versus best defense. And this is one where we know you can actually force a naturally occurring cycle to happen at your speed in the lab. So Jason, that's a great idea. I think we should do that. Maybe CSAT's a great place to do that.
Yeah, and how would that happen, Jason? Would that, to get a little bit in the weeds, would that be a government-wide kind of initiative? Would it be something that was like kind of segmented so that each different entity could use these red teaming blueprints? Like, I love that idea.
I think there are a few places that have really strong red team capability already. Parts of NSA, for example, that do this on the cyber side and have the right kind of sensibility about this. Like, let's really try to break these systems, as opposed to just sort of trying to break these systems. Because it's, I don't know if you've ever played chess with yourself. You kind of want one side to win, and you don't play as hard on the other side. And I think we need to avoid that. We really need to try to make a full effort in order to break our systems, because that's what our competitors will be doing. So I think NSA is a natural for some of that work. For the most classified work, DoD is also going to need elsewhere at lower levels of classification. I'd say collateral secret and top secret, to do this work on systems that are less sensitive, but are also going to have an attack surface. And then, for a lot of our public systems that aren't part of national security, NIST is, I think, the natural place to go. And it's one of my my sort of favorite underdog agencies. I love NIST so much. I ordered custom NIST T-shirts for our staff at CSET to wear as part of a social marketing effort for NIST. I think they've never forgiven me for making them wear those, but really, NIST needs, the resources in order to build a national test bed for AI systems on the unclassified side.
So guys, a lot of the questions that are coming in while we're talking about this have to do with China. China obviously has a completely different kind of blueprint for developing AI. Sue, I've heard you speak in the past about this. So let me just pose one of the questions from Tamsin Shaw. Do we know much about China's blueprint? And to what extent does that determine ours?
We know a fair amount about capability just from competitions that are global, and we could have a whole side conversation about why you want to be globally participative. It isn't just to avail yourself of the talent. It isn't just to be leaders. It is also to know what's going on. If you come up with a totally isolated economies or technology communities, it's going to be harder. So I think we know a fair amount capability-wise. This question of use is one that I think is still testing us. If you look at what we really need to develop from an intelligence capability, it's really the operational intelligence against our adversaries in terms of how they're going to use information and how they're going to kind of end-to-end communicate. So I think we know at the capability level the beginning. I think the use is where the game is going to be, and I think that's still a little bit elusive in terms of how you have to gather that information. What I've said before is I think one of the advantages China has, besides making the investments they've made in the technology and in the compute, is their governance model allows them to use data differently than we can use data. And they're getting, no matter, we could talk later about what you think about what they're doing with it, but they are getting a lot of practice with data. And practice with data is a really important piece of understanding all the issues we talked about. What do the data need to look like? How do you need to be able to move it? How do you assure where are the weaknesses? And so they're getting a lot of practice nationally, an advantage of a totalitarian regime, which, by the way, I would not trade an open system for. But just practically, there are some things that they have that are allowing them to put things into use at scale a little bit differently than us. We have some other advantages that we could talk about, but I think that's where we are with them. What do you think, Jason? Do I have that about right?
I think that's right. And I do think too, one of the things, Sue, that you helped to lead was the creation of an IC Net Assessments office at ODNI to think about long-term competition, including technology competition between US and China. So assess our capabilities, assess our strategies, assess competitors' technologies, competitors' strategies, and figure out where the asymmetric strengths and weaknesses are that we could double down on. And I think to support that, we do need a bigger investment in S&T intelligence on our competitors' capabilities, but not just capabilities, also plans, where they're focusing effort. So investment trends. We have not done, I think, historically a great job of S&T intelligence on commercial or dual use technologies. We've tended to emphasize intelligence on weapon systems, and I think we probably need to double down on this area of intelligence so that we've got enough understanding of what the capabilities and strategies are that we're going to face.
Mm-hmm. We have another great question here. Let's see, from Jeremy Harris, who says, General Petraeus mentioned the economic pressure against maintaining the human in the loop systems. How can we ensure that safety remains prioritized and avoid a more general race to the bottom on safety as countries and other actors compete for technical dominance? Jason, why don't you tackle this one first, and then we'll go to Sue?
Yeah, so first, I think there are some encouraging signs that the US and China have some agreements about the importance of safety. There's common ground there. I think both countries want to avoid strategic miscalculation. I think both countries don't want to have autonomy in our nuclear command and control systems. Both countries, I think, are worried about the proliferation of autonomous weapons into the commercial sector that could, we don't want weaponized drones to become the next AK-47. And I think there's a lot in common between the US and China on those fronts. I think there's also been interest within at least the think tank community about, is there something like the permissive action link for nuclear weapons, a safety technology that you can embed into AI that in fact you would want to co-develop and share with your competitors, because it would ultimately make us safer too, to prevent unauthorized use or technical accidents from happening in AI systems. I think that's a really important area for research, and we need to be investing there. Over to you, Sue.
Yeah, that last point, assurance, safety, security, all those things have an advantage that you don't need to protect them, because if everyone was secure, if everyone was safe, if assurance were there, the world is better, period. And so I think that's an area where when you invest, the imperative to protect or hoard or keep it to yourself actually goes the other way, which is different from many critical technologies. So I think it's an area that would be a really interesting one. Well, one, it's necessary for us to double down on. Two, it's one you can double down on openly, because I defy anyone to think about a scenario where security broadly applied isn't good for free and open societies.
Sue, you mentioned you're a hard grader. Jared Ettinger is joining us. He has a question. He says, what does an A+ letter grade look like in the categories that you mentioned? And how will we know when we get there? I love that question.
That's a great question. Damn you. So to me is you are able to achieve the outcome you want to the fidelity you need at the speed that you require. And you cannot leave elements of the decision chain out. And we do this all the time. So if you ask, are we innovative? We are. Ask me if our processes have innovated at the same rate our capabilities have. They have not. So what we do is we have new capability that we can use, and whether that process is policy or whether that process is approval, things come to a screeching halt. So objective you want, fidelity you need, speed that is required in an end-to-end fashion to allow decision-making is an A+ in any of the functions that you need.
Jason, would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. And I mean, I think, concretely we could measure speed of hiring and speed of deployment of new software on our networks, and how competitive are we compared to industry. And if we're much slower than industry, which we are on both metrics right now, we're not doing well. It takes us a year plus in many cases to hire experts into the IC. It takes us a year plus to deploy a new piece of software, onto our classified networks. And for industry, they can hire less than a week. They can deploy a new tool within days or within hours. So that's what we should be aiming for, and we should be figuring out where are the choke points, where are the bottlenecks in our process that we can start unwinding.
There might be another one here posed in this question from Joe Bartlett. He says, if we're going to utilize the private sector to develop AI capabilities, what is the best way to facilitate data sharing between DoD, the IC, and private industry to develop the necessary data sets to develop these capabilities? It's another issue that I know Sue's talked about extensively. What do you think?
So this is a hard question. So I'm going to stall for a second so you can come up with a good answer. Jason, I think the first is the government has to recognize that the private sector has their own value proposition that has to be accounted for. And the private sector has to recognize that this is national security we're talking about, so being responsible and protective. And the government has to not overclassify, so we can't take advantage. And the private sector has got to recognize that what they develop has got to be able to be used within a governmental system. So to me, it's coming up with first principles that are shared. But this isn't one where you can just articulate what the government needs and dictate that that's what happens. So I think it's a yin and a yang in terms of what each side can do and what each side has to do.
What do you think, Jason?
I think that's spot on. I mean, the only thing I would add is something just that Sue explored when she was at NGA is, one, do we think that some of our imagery is maybe more precious than it is given developments in the commercial sector? And are there ways to make more of it available to the private sector for them to use for training? and then sort of create these exchanges of data for trained algorithms. And I think, you know, Robert Cardillo has also written on this. I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities to explore there.
Another question here, and I know Sue has a hard out today in about 6 minutes, and we're going to grant that so that everybody can go watch her on CNBC. You didn't hear that. So the question is, what is Congress's role? And thank you, Michael Cameron, for sending this in. What is Congress's role in AI development and technology? Sue, why don't you start?
We need leadership. So what's awesome about the opportunity that Congress provides is they do bridge the gap between the citizens, the private sector, and the government, right? Unfortunately, the committee structure too often gets in the way, and competing interests are used as an excuse to not do something. But I think this is an area really and truly where the Congress can not only provide more funding to government, they can do clever things, not just to regulate, because regulation tends to entrench the incumbent, but actually incentivize some of the things we need. So I think Congress has a huge opportunity. It has been hard to get even cybersecurity advanced through, because there is this, do you want to support the advance and the profitability of our companies, or do you want to advance security? And I think they are especially well positioned to come together. I think the current committee structure probably needs to be reconsidered in some of these cross-cutting issues in order to be able to get at real solution.
Jason, agree?
It's a great point about structure, and I think it would be really useful to think through what are some alternatives to the current kind of bottlenecking of committee structures for these cross-cutting issues. I do think some of my heroes on AI are congressional staff, who I think not only are really thoughtful about the technology, but also incredibly smart about the policy levers. So Sam Malopoulos, Will Wu, Raphaela Wakeman, Arjun Ravindra. I mean, I think these are some of the best people working in government on AI and their congressional staff. So, you know, that makes me optimistic that in fact we can move pretty quickly, just given the quality of people that we have on the committee staff. But I agree completely with Sue that we need to get more creative about how we enable the committees to move faster. And we also, I think, need to ease up on the constraints that we have on communication between the agencies and the committees.
Yep.
It's just very, very difficult to be working, you know, every time you want to have a phone call, working through a leg affairs officer. So I don't know what the way to fix that, but we need to fix it.
Yeah. Sue, any closing thoughts?
I can't wait to see the next 5 sessions. The questions alone are worthy enough, each one of them, to be explored. I take great comfort that Jason has such a great leadership position, but just remember, just because we're better doesn't mean we're good enough.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank you for being here. Jason, I'm just going to ask you to stick around for another couple of minutes because I know Sue has to get out early. So closing thoughts from you on this. And as we look to our next session, which is about Congress, what are the questions that need to be put to Congress, or what are the demands that need to be made of Congress to exhibit leadership on this issue? Not just the staffers. The staffers are obviously brilliant people who are pushing these agendas, but what more can we do?
I mean, my main closing thought is just how awesome Sue is. I mean, just one of my favorite human beings. So I wish we could clone her. I'll work on that. I'll work on the technology there.
You are probably the guy to figure that out.
We'll set up a program.
I love it.
I think with Congress, I'm really encouraged by what was in the NDAA. I think the AI Commission, we tracked that like 20 of our core recommendations were in the final version of the NDAA, and we thought it was, you know, among the highest priority issues that we worked on. So I think the NDAA has just lots of great content in there. There's a few different summaries of the AI provisions within the NDAA that are floating around. I think one from the American Institute of Physics was especially good. I think that the main thing now is to follow up with appropriations. that are right-sized given the scale of need. And that is often where we've seen a breakdown. We've seen lots of good authorization language, and then when it comes time to appropriations, we don't follow through. We have a new administration coming in that had a very ambitious R&D agenda with a proposal to add $300 billion over 4 years. We have Schumer, who had a very ambitious proposal for an Endless Frontier Act to significantly increase our R&D investments. So I hope that we will see some scale up in the level of investment in R&D. But I also think we need to fix some of these bureaucratic issues. So getting Congress to work with the intelligence community to make it possible to use advanced procurement mechanisms that are not, standard procurement contracts that nobody in the private sector ever wants to see again, but instead are much more flexible ways for us to acquire technology, including AI, and helping to push us on some of these institutional reforms like more flexible hiring. Congress can do a lot just by asking questions. And, this is something that doesn't cost anything, but actually gets the agencies to move forward in a way that they would like to move forward, but often they just need the question from Congress to feel like they have the ability to move forward. So Congress can do a lot there. And then I think, lastly, on this point about scientific and technical intelligence, I think there we really need substantially larger resources. And without, can't go into the numbers of how many full-time analysts we have following emerging tech, but it is shockingly low, and we need to increase that by, I would say, 10x in order to be in a place where I would feel like we're at least starting to meet the need.
To be competitive. I very much appreciate that. One of the other issues that both Mark at the beginning of this conversation and General Petraeus touched on, and then Sue, I've heard her talk about this in the past, is a very important one, is the issue of trust. And so let me just, as a final question for this particular session, throw this question out there from Janaki Cates. If we work on mutually beneficial AI uses, how do we establish trust? Look at the issues with establishing peaceful use of space, for example.
Yeah, it's a great point about space. My wife, who works on space policy issues, talks about how we need something like an incidents at sea agreement for space, because we don't have established norms of behavior in space, and there's lots of opportunity for miscalculation or misinterpretation. I think we will need something similar for AI. That is, we will need to establish a set of norms on what appropriate conduct looks like. I agree with the statements that we will probably have autonomous weapon systems of various types, certainly in cyber and probably increasingly in kinetic warfare. And we need to establish norms around their use. And I think, in fact, we can find a lot of common ground with China, especially, hopefully, eventually with Russia, which I think has been much more reckless, unfortunately, in the way that it's deployed autonomous weapons, such as the Arun 9 system in Syria. So I think that will take work, but aspiring to build things like the Incidents at Sea Agreement for a range of different domains is, I think, a really good ambition.
Yeah, and a big important part of moving toward trust. Jason, thank you for being here. I can't thank you enough. I think I should have given you an even greater shout out at the beginning. You were the first person I called when we had decided to undertake this very important series of conversations, and just have so many ideas and thoughts on this topic that are cutting edge, leading, and where our country needs to be led. So thank you for what you're doing at CSET. We look forward to hearing from you again in this series, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Suzanne. It's great to see you. Great to see Sue. Great to see Mark, and great to see General Petraeus. Really appreciate it.
I want to thank everyone as well. We had hundreds of people sign in for today's session. So thank you for sending in the questions. I really apologize if we didn't get to yours. We tried to cover a lot of the broader topics, but we had a lot of questions and they were fantastic. Thank you to our sponsor, Microsoft Federal. It's really important to support sort of small independent media agencies, and so that they can host conversations like this. So it's a big deal that they have come in and underwritten this series for us. So thank you. Keep your eyes on our free Cipher Brief newsletter at thecipherbrief.com for more upcoming dates on future sessions and links to register. Thanks everyone, stay safe out there, and we'll see you again soon.